Sweden and India have been, since 1948, nurturing diplomatic relations that are based on common values and that have grown stronger over the decades till today. Trade and investment between these two countries, especially in goods and services, have grown rapidly in recent years, from US $3 billion in 2016 to US $4.6 billion in 2021. India is also the third largest trading partner for Sweden in Asia. I wanted to find out more about what impact the current geopolitical challenges have had on their bilateral trade and what structural reforms are on the table on both ends as they move toward a sustainable future. Who best to address my queries than Mr. Robin Sukhia, the Secretary General and President of the Sweden-India Business Council. Watch this. Hey, welcome to the Chamber Guy. We are here with Mr. Robin Sukhia, the Secretary General and President of the Sweden-India Business Council. Robin, great to have you.
Thank you. Glad to be here, Francis.
Now, Robin, before we speak about the council, we would like to know, you look like a fun guy. Did you grow up in Sweden?
I did, actually. My father's from India, but my mother's Swedish, so I was born here and brought up here. But we traveled to India every year, actually, since I was a kid.
Right. If you can give us a little bit of your background, because we'd like to know, how did you end up becoming the president of the council?
Sure. So after university was in the US, I came back and started actually importing product from India. And believe it or not, it was hair care and other products, but not that had anything to do with this. But I did that for about a year and a half.
Right.
Very nice line, and sold that company. And then I started something that led into venture capital. So I actually became a VC or venture capital investor through a small VC company here in Sweden, which was targeting ICT investments in early stage startups. So I did that for about 10 years. And it was a lot of fun. And that led me very early on, actually, to invest into, we were one of the first Nordic institutions to invest into India. So I sat on the board of that company. It was a startup as well, and to service our other 25 ICT companies. And so I traveled there all the time. And given that I have family there as well, it was very natural to just be there, stay there for a few weeks, and then nurture that company, so to speak. But that was in the November 2000, so it's quite a long time ago.
Right.
We did that for 7 years, and then until I quit. Yeah.
Great. Now, let's talk about the Sweden-India Business Council. Now, SIBC for short, I believe. SIBC was established in 2003. Could you walk us through the early years of SIBC? I mean, why was it set up all the way back in 2003?
Sure.
What were the aims and the objectives? And do the same aims and objectives apply today?
Good question, because it's very clear that if you look at the relationship between Sweden and China, for example, there have been Swedes living in China for 50, 60 years. So the informal relationships between the countries were a lot stronger there, but the informal relationship between Sweden and India were not there. You had a lot of Swedes, like my father, who moved to Sweden in 1959, I think it was, doing when Sweden needed a lot of engineers. So there's a lot of Indians coming to work in the companies here, but there was not, the bilateral relationships going on. Swedish companies have been in India forever, but again, it was still not the Swedes moving there and the informal relationship. So when we were set up in 2003, it was post a ministerial delegation with a couple of CEOs that went down and realized that we need to have an organization between Sweden and India that can actually nurture not only the relationships, but also make people understand what's going on in India, and also the Indian companies interested in coming to Sweden. So for that purpose, and with a huge focus on understanding and knowledge, we were set up as a business council and not a chamber of commerce. So that was the early days. And the aim at that time was to create a lot more of, I think, events and understanding then how to do it, how to do business in India. It was a lot of these early things on which I think most companies did in the beginning. But then it has evolved. So it's not the same as today as it was at that time. We started out with a very clear objective that the understanding of India and Sweden was quite low, actually. It's pretty much the same of understanding of Sweden and India. So we said that we will bombard the market with a lot of case studies, a lot of quick, easy breakfast meetings where we could have the people come in and talk about their challenges and how they overcame them and how they sort of made the entire initiative a success. And we would moderate those sessions a lot, so it became very interactive in the beginning. And we did that for the first 10 years, actually. And we did about 30 activities per year, which made us one of the, I think, most active country-to-country organizations in the world.
Yep.
Which is a lot of fun, of course. But after you've done that for 10 years and you've done all these hundreds of events, then you do something different. So obviously the strategy sort of switched a little bit. But one of the main parts we did in the beginning also is to change the perception of India was for us a main part. So we concluded very quickly that there would be no animals on any pictures, anything we have, and no poverty or anything, because that people around the world knows those things. What else can we bring out? So we started looking at modern India. We started looking at engineering, technology, and see how we can actually bring that out, and also the success stories. And that took us for 10 years, and then we started looking at other things.
Right. Now, I understand, I believe this was in Stockholm, the 9th annual India-Sweden Innovation Day 2022.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
This was just concluded on the 27th of October. We understand India and Sweden are collaborating to ensure a sustainable future for both countries, and this being accomplished via various projects. Could you elaborate a little bit more about the projects that you have in place, as well as tell us a little bit more about the event that just took place?
Sure. I'll start a little bit on the event because that leads us into the project. The event is, I think it was the eighth or ninth event that we had. And it was founded by a friend of mine called Sanju Malhotra and in something called India Unlimited in the beginning. And the main purpose of it was to showcase modern India as well as one big event per year. That later on sort of switched into Sweden-India Innovation Day. And the reason for that is, of course, that there is a bilateral agreement called Sweden-India Joint Declaration on Innovation for a Sustainable Future, I believe. And through that, it's sort of an overarching agreement between the countries where a lot of industry and government agencies and others can actually tag along and see what they can collaborate on. And we have done a lot of different initiatives between the countries, and we try to showcase them on this day. So it's sort of an umbrella event to bring in a lot of the initiatives which are happening between the countries, and we can showcase and have dialogues and where we stand today and how we take it forward. An example of that is the Sweden-India Transportation Innovation Safety, which is a partnership between 15 organizations, 8 Swedish and 7 Indian companies, and it's what we call a triple helix. So it's industry, government, and academia working together. So you have the large companies, and it's spearheaded by Volvo Group, and then you have Ericsson and Saab and some other organization, Autoliv, of course. And on the Indian side, you have IT Delhi, Indian Institute of Science, and Manipal Hospitals, actually, and ARAI, and some other companies. So the idea for that is that they've actually worked together every second week since February 2020. They meet online and to come up with different innovation projects to work for traffic safety. As you know, there are about 400 deaths per year, per day in India in traffic. Right. So whatever can be done in that area and focus on technology innovation will be a huge benefit, obviously. So that is one. The other one would be a government or an agency, the Swedish Energy Agency, working with another organization called Business Sweden on energy companies and different energy products. And they've done that for also, I think, about 7 years. And they target startups and small companies and help them nurture them sort of into the Indian market, and they have been very successful on that as well. And there's been over 100 companies that they've supported in the smaller scale to actually help them come in and support the Indian efforts on providing more renewable and sustainable energy field. Yeah, then we also try to do something else, and that is the tech startup delegations. And we do that in an ecosystem nowadays. And that is also to connect a lot of the ecosystem, both in Sweden and India, because as you know, the startup ecosystem in India is very advanced nowadays. 10 years ago was not that at all, but it's been something through this government. So we try to take a delegation every year, and also the delegation from India to Sweden, and usually during this innovation day, where we have then companies, large companies and small companies, to participate in the event and create those business meetings. So it's a lot of engagement in that day, and many stakeholders participate in that day as well: government, academia, industry, anyone, and media as well. So it's really interesting that way.
Oh, it's incredible the lengths that you actually go to bridge the gap.
We try. Yes.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, and in terms of the length, it's the success factor of that is actually the number of collaborations and the number of players. You can't do things in silos. You have to have companies to engage together and sort of share together, and that's the only way that you can actually move forward. Be open. So that's something that we are very much forward on.
Are companies open to receiving help? I do know
Yes,
there's a
they
lot of
are.
companies, yeah, they move into a country, but at the end of the day, they are a little bit wary about approaching any chamber or any business association.
Yes, you're right. From that perspective, I think a lot of companies are a little bit not only reluctant in the sense you mean also, but also they don't really understand why should I be part of a chamber? Because I think a chamber or business council has, unfortunately, I think historically, a little bit of a dull ring to it, unfortunately. So I think the more successful chambers, and there are the ones now, I think most of them actually around the world are now changing, and you're including so many other things to make it more fun and more interesting. So and given that the global topics are becoming really global, it becomes more streamlined, and to create activities together with your local country, but also with others. So I think it's getting a very different today than it was before. Companies are reluctant, and I think Swedish companies particularly are a little bit, and I know them better, but they are a little bit hesitant on participating somewhere. They want to sort of reinvent the wheel every time. And but suddenly you get a couple of those who say, no, we need help, please help us. And that's beautiful. Then we really get them on board. But once we get them on board, just invite people, even if they're members, we can invite them to different activities. And then when we catch them, they're ours.
Great. Now, it is forecasted that India would be the world's third largest economy by 2030. Tell us about Swedish companies that are investing in India amidst the structural reforms, as well as the shift in consumer behavior towards new digital business models and e-commerce.
So in Swedish industry has been part of the Indian growth story since 120 years. Ericsson set up shop there already in 1903, and then you have the large companies coming in. Now through the Make in India, you see a lot of more interest, I would say. There's still some hesitation, but there's a lot more interest on setting up shop in India in terms of manufacturing. So those companies are coming in, large, small, medium size. They're all looking at it, and we're running a series called Make in India. So that's happening all the time. In terms of the tech sector, which is really interesting, you can see that there's a big interest as well. But given also Truecaller, Spotify, those guys are there already, and they're doing phenomenal work, and they're doing really, really well. Then you have other companies like Scandinavian Chemotech, which I sit on the board of, and they are also launching in India. Together with a company, or not together, with another company called Brandy. These are all technology companies which are focused on India as the first markets, because they realize that India has what it takes, first of all, to bring them to wherever they want to be, given the talent, given the market, given the data, and all these things that they may require. But it's also a way of sort of getting around. I think why it's easier for some of the tech startups and tech companies, because there's not that many regulations in terms of import-export duties and things. Now they may pop up. I saw that in the free trade agreement discussions that may pop up, but I don't think it will happen actually. But if it doesn't, then of course that's still an easy way for companies to enter India, and they can do it from Sweden in the beginning, and then or any other country, and then they can actually start operating pretty quickly. I remember from what the founder of Truecaller told me is like they were just working, and then one day, over a period of a few days, suddenly they just saw that India shot up to millions of downloads in a few days, and they had no idea why did this happen, and that's how India became their biggest market. So it can happen very quickly if you get it right. So I think doing this Digital India, Startup India are huge, beautiful efforts to help not only startup actually, but bigger companies looking for innovation technology to get supported by the Indian government and other startups and conferences that are put up all around the country. So there's a lot happening there, and I think the interest is very big. Still, there are challenges still with setting up a company and all these nitty-gritty things. There's still some way to go.
Right. Now, I do understand both Sweden as well as India are working towards their green energy goals. Now, how do Swedish companies perceive the business climate in India, given whatever's happening in the world at this point in time?
So there is one of our sister organizations does a really nice thing which we support, and it's called we support in terms of events. It's called the Business Climate Survey, and they do it now also, I think, for the 7th, 8th year. It's a lot of them. You can download it from their website. It's really nice, and it's has a 91% response rate from the Swedish companies in India, and I think there are 250 of them now. And they reply on how they feel in the short term and in the long term. So in the long term, it's always been very positive. They're there for the long term. They're not there for a in and out kind of market and see how it goes. They're actually there for the long term, which makes it more viable for them to make shorter term investments as well. So the short term, of course, I think with anyone, there's still some hesitations and things which are hopefully going to be overcome now through all these initiatives the government is trying to do. But and regulations are becoming better, but it's still in the short term. It's not as positive as in the long term. But yeah, so that's in terms of the business climate survey.
Right. Thank you for that. Now, as we all know, India is a fast-growing economy with huge untapped potential, and Sweden, as with other Nordic countries, are pioneers in innovation, clean energy, green technologies, education, healthcare, human rights, rule of law, you name it. What are the geostrategic challenges faced by both Sweden as well as India when it comes to bilateral cooperation?
So there are, I think we saw a lot of truths come out in terms of what countries need during the COVID period. There was a lot of interest still going on with India, and the Indian interest, of course, through all the engineers that are supporting Swedish industry here. And given that we had a little bit of different rules than many other places, the relationship was very strong and it was ongoing. We had pretty much an open society here, right? So all the engineers, I think there's about 20,000 now in Sweden, were living life as normal and could continue with their business. So that was a strong component, I think, of the continuing with the bilateral relations, focusing on business and continue focusing on innovation. And there are, of course, geopolitical issues now where we see what's happening in China, for example. What will that actually generate more business for Swedish industry or for Indian industry with the Make in India and the efforts they're trying there? Yes and no, it all depends, because when it comes down to it, the companies will make a judgment on India's own merits, not whatever China is doing. So I don't think that usually it comes up as a China plus one. I don't think that's a fair comparative, because India is a market that should be judged on its own merits. And companies will, and they are looking at India now because it is becoming easier to do things. And specifically, you're looking at the next investment, the next R&D, the next things that actually going to make an effort on a global scale for your company, then India is a perfect partner. And we're seeing a lot of companies actually, many companies setting up or trying to set up shop, looking at specifically on R&D and setting up a manufacturing which will cater to the world. Before, it may have been the case that would have been China. Now, if the Chinese market is where they want to be, they will remain there. There's no doubt about that. But they may also set up new things which cater to the Chinese market in Vietnam, for example. So it's got nothing to do with India per se. But the global, I think India has a huge opportunity now, and that is something that Swedish companies and others will have to capture. That this is the opportunity, and it's for India to lose it, right? So, and for international companies to see how can they actually adapt to make this happen in India. And I think both the business councils and chambers play a huge role there. How can we help with various activities to showcase the companies that this is viable, and bring in, as a third party, bring in stakeholders and actors and government officials to sit around the table and discuss hardcore issues. So chambers and business councils play a huge role there.
Well, Robin, thanks for that. We have actually come to the end of part one, and we will continue with further discussion in part two shortly. So thank you for your time, Robin, and I will see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.